Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you for having me. Thank you for coming to my talk. I was wondering, I'm very happy I'm not upstairs because quantum encryption is far beyond my capabilities. If French is beyond your capabilities, then you're in the right track. That should be okay. So, usually I really try to keep the ball flat and have reasonable and modest titles. Now my wife tells me I didn't succeed this time. So this might be a bit exaggerating. So probably not that a reasonable title at all. Can we make a deal? You hear me out, and at the end I'll ask you again if it was reasonable and modest or not. If that's okay. Good. Let's get formalities behind us. Boring bio. Few people know that I have a background in medieval history. And as it happens, I used to run a medieval reenactment company, which was founded exactly 30 years ago in Grandson, very close from Yverdon. But as it happens, I somehow ended up from this middle-aged thing into the IT security industry. And here I am talking about denial of service attacks. Now, honestly, as you see with this background, I don't have much clue what I'm talking about. So if I don't really know why I ended up in this program in the first place, but if you could just keep my background to yourself, and we'll see how this works. Table of contents. I'm going to do an introduction to denial of service attacks. There are two reasons for this. First, we need to be on the same page. So everybody should be on the same page. Everybody should really have a clear understanding what denial of service attacks or distributed denial of service attacks is all about. B, the second, probably more honest reason is my slot is 50 minutes, and that's an awful lot of time. So by filling the time with an introduction, I can steal a bit of your time. Sorry about that, but please bear with me. I'm going to look into denial of service trends. A few of these trends that we have been seeing the last few years are fairly obvious. Others are not so obvious, actually not at all. And I think there is a game changer that few people have noticed so far. I'm going to explain this and prove the point. Traditional defense methods against massive, large-scale denial of service attacks are hitting a limit, I think. So we're kind of heading into a dead end somehow, and we need alternatives. And what I'm going to propose is an alternative method to defend against massive, large-scale denial of service attacks. And of course, such a defense comes with a few strings attached. And as it happens with this method that I'm proposing, one of the strings attached could lead to the end of the internet. So yeah, it's a bold statement, it's a bold prediction, and for your convenience, I added a craziness-o-meter on the right. So you're an attentive crowd, so you might have noticed that this talk is starting in a fairly reasonable and sane level, and it's getting more and more crazy the more I advance. I think there is a certain, it's really building up. There is a certain line of argument in this, but maybe I'll leave, you'll drop off along the way, and if you brought along tomatoes, rotten eggs, I propose you keep them for the end of my talk, where they're more suitable than for the beginning, where I still hope you will follow my argumentation. You also maybe want to follow me on Twitter, because during the talk I have scheduled a few tweets that reference documents which I'm talking about in the talk. And I'm retweeting one or two things during the talk. Just so follow me on Twitter so you catch those. I'm not going to display the URLs. Good. When you take stock photos, then the hackers always wear hoodies. If you do Creative Commons photos, you have a hard time finding a hacker with a hoodie in Creative Commons. But I really searched long, and I hope you appreciate that he is actually wearing a hoodie. It took me a long time to find a Creative Commons photo with a hacker with a hoodie. But what this slide is all about is CIA. Now, CIA is not only American Secret Service, Foreign Secret Service. It also refers to an acronym which you certainly know. It's confidentiality, integrity, availability. This is what security boils down to in the inner core. What we do in security is we try to guarantee confidentiality, integrity, and availability. There is this saying that you can only have two. So there are three in this acronym, but you only can have two. Lucky enough, denial of service attacks are only about availability. So we take confidentiality, integrity granted, and the attackers will only attack availability. Do I have you with me? Do you agree on that? Denial of service attack is about availability of a service. I see a few nodding heads. Yeah. Let's assume that everybody is in the boat. Good. So what is a denial of service attack targeting? It's generally targeting three targets in a very broad sense. First, you have bandwidth on the right. So it targets bandwidth, basically. Bandwidth is the pipe that runs into your server. It runs into your service, into your cloud. Now, the cloud may sound like an endless supply of bandwidth, but actually that's not quite the case. Bandwidth in the cloud is closely related, or it maps one-to-one to your bank account. So filling the pipe running into your cloud means taking out the money of your bank account. So even if you're in the cloud, under the line, at a certain moment, you will need to push the stop button. Because you can no longer support or finance the denial of service attack. That's my reasoning here. Somehow proving that you're able to serve the content, that you're able to respond to the requests or the packets that flow into your network is somehow related to a proof of work. I mean, the attacker attacks you and you're proving him, yes, I can respond, I'm still available, I maintain availabilities, I'm still serving my service, you cannot kill me. Somehow this is a proof of work with a lot of friction. There is a lot of heat, there is a lot of data flowing around without serving a purpose. Somehow it's a proof of work like crypto money. Just you prove that you're able to do something and you attack or you affect global warming somehow. So this is DDoS defense when a bandwidth or CPU attack hits you is like crypto money without the coins somehow. Just extremely expensive to defend against. The second target, so outside of the network, is CPU. Often it's very hard to distinguish, is this now a bandwidth attack or is this a CPU attack? In practical world, doesn't really matter too much. It's just, they try to kill you and you try to stay alive somehow. So CPU is always involved or very often involved, and it's involved in places, very small bits of CPU where you're not really expecting it. So a three-way TCP/IP handshake involves CPU. Maintaining a TCP session or an application session, for that sense, is involving CPU. A firewall doing stateful inspection of incoming traffic is CPU-based. And the web application firewall, that's my domain. That's what I usually work on when I'm not doing medieval stuff and not doing DDoS defense. A web application firewall is filtering based on regular expression, and that involves a lot of CPU. So that's all CPU-wise, extremely intense, extremely expensive. And least of not all, a TLS handshake, an encryption handshake, is a lot of CPU, a lot of calculation. So that's a lot of work. And then finally, we have storage. With storage, I'm not only referring to disks, I refer to storage in a very broad sense. So we have bandwidth, that's the pipe. We have the brain of the computer, CPU, and we have the memory, the storage, the RAM, the disk space. But this, in a broader sense, the TCP connections are a form of storage because you need to keep them up. It's a resource that you have, a limited resource. Port numbers are limited on a server. Threads, processes are limited on a server. I'm working with web servers. Mutexes, semaphores are resources, namely of the Apache web server. That's all limited. You don't have an endless supply of these. A DDoS attack tries to eat them up. So an attacker can try to eat up resources from his part. He can try out all the resources where you have a certain limit and where he's able to directly consume them or indirectly. That's what this is all about. In a denial of service attack, you have a single client. It's staggering how much mayhem that a single client can actually provoke or cause. But in a distributed setting, you just have hundreds of thousands of them. It doesn't make things much easier when you face an army of hundreds of thousands. Good. Let's look back at DDoS attacks in Switzerland. In the early years, we had online shops. So around 2000, 2005, online shops in Switzerland would attack each other. They would DDoS each other to bomb the competition out of the business. CEO of one of the early online shops told me that. And that was affecting business, like for everybody. And he said, we met into a bar, we drank a few beers and decided, look, let's stop this madness. Let's stop killing each other. And this is off the table now. And he said that actually succeeded. It stopped immediately. When they all agreed, let's stop DDoSing each other. Of course, this was years before law enforcement, criminal prosecution found out what DDoS even exists. So if they would have went to the police, completely senseless. No point. So they sorted this out amongst themselves. Blue Wind chat servers were famous for being DDoS constantly in the early days. World of Warcraft clients, very nice target. If you're battling with your friends or enemies and then you DDoS their client, then you win the battle. That's a lot of fun, I'm sure. Online poker sites, wonderful. During a poker game, high stake, you DDoS the server and you don't lose. Stuff like that happened a lot. In Switzerland, it came to public attention, or DDoS came to public attention in 2010 with so-called Operation Payback. Those not familiar with that attack, there was one Swiss Post, or Post Finance, to be honest, announced publicly that they're stopping doing business with Julian Assange from WikiLeaks. Immediately a denial of service attack set in. As it happened, I used to be on the server during that moment. I used to be on the server being under attack. There are a couple of videos where I talk about this at security conferences, what happened. And yeah, of course, it was a huge denial of service attack. Swiss Post had Anonymous come after them, like literally minutes after the press release. And I think Post Finance learned it the hard way that it's not a very smart business move to talk to the media about your customer relations. Especially not if the customer is very close to Anonymous or is WikiLeaks itself. So this was immediate attack. A couple of years ago, the attacks on Protomail started. I think this is still ongoing. 2018, Protomail saw more denial of service attacks. And 2016, we have a campaign targeting Digitech, Co-op, Shop, the online shop, I think. They targeted Swiss trains as well. This was an extortion attack. And probably a few other shops. I don't really remember. So that has been a bigger campaign targeting several businesses. And ever since, it's been mostly silent in Switzerland. Why has it been silent? I think in 2016 and in 2017, we have learned that extortion is much more effective via ransomware. So organized crime, interested in gaining money online via criminal activities, they resort to ransomware now. This is a direct link. And this is easier than sending an email to somebody, look, we're going to take down your business unless you pay. Just prove your point by encrypting all their files. That's a lot easier. I think that's why we haven't seen denial of service attacks for the last 2 years. But looking back at this, you'll see Postfine has been a vandalism attack. This wasn't extortion. This was just, you're assholes and you messed with Julian Assange and we're coming after you. So vandalism is not interested in gaining money. They're just in for the destruction. With Protomail, the case is not as clear as that. This might have been a vandalism attack. There were rumors about extortion as well. Maybe it's just a teenage kid that did this for the first time. But it's a huge attack. And what Protomail did, they went under the umbrella of a denial of service defense company. And that's very typical. So they had somebody who supports them with their online availability Post-finance, on the other hand, when I was on the server, we defended differently. The first leverage was talking to the management and tell them what is happening. Tell them, don't go to press ever again. And then let's do GeoIP. Let's say we're only talking to Swiss IP addresses anymore, because this is a global anonymous attack. And the moment we start to only talk to Swiss customers, yep, thank you. We only start to Swisscom, the attack will be over immediately. And of course, Swiss Post or Swiss Post Finance said, no, we cannot do this. We cannot cut international customers. So look, this is like the only thing we can do. And let's do this, and after 10 minutes, the attack will be over. And talking to management took like a day, and then they finally agreed, and then after 10 minutes, the attack was over. Because the attacker would say, yeah, they're still down, and then somebody in the chat room, we've been with the attackers in the chat room, that's IRC, that's modern. So you're in the chat room with the attackers, the FBI is probably there, CIA and whatnot, and they say, yeah, they're still down, and then somebody says with a very Swiss name, no, they're up. And then they go, how's that? Oh, that's very stupid. The attack is no longer effective. Let's go to Sweden and attack somebody there. That's what happened. Then it was over. So that's how Swiss Post defended it. Protomail went under your umbrella, Digitech, Swiss Trains, etc. I think they went under an umbrella as well. Generally, these umbrellas, that's a very customer-oriented business. You don't have to prepare anything then. You're under attack, you pick up your phone, could you help me? And say, yeah, just fill out this form and we protect you. And after 15 minutes, the attack is over. And afterward, you get a small bill. And usually that's an annual renewed service. Yeah. So that's how this DDoS defense business works nowadays. Generally, you see extortion and you see vandalism, and attacks usually either of the two. Important to note is probably it's extremely hard to do criminal prosecution here. Why is that? The person interested in attacking you is not hurting its own botnet to attack you. Of course, they don't do that. There is denial of service as a service, denial of service as a service, so to speak. So DOS as a service, you go there, you fill out an IP address and hit attack them. And then you enter your Visa card. And they have very good customer relationship management as well. They're really interested in your satisfaction. So they bomb somebody until it really goes down if they have the capabilities. And criminal prosecution is extremely hard because the person running the botnet is not residing within Switzerland. And the person who runs the botnet and the online service, they're all not in Switzerland, probably. And unless you're able to stop somebody with a smoking gun because he has written a stupid email, send me money to my Swiss bank account, it's very hard to keep hold of him, of an attacker. I think, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, there hasn't been a conviction in Switzerland outside of the few cases where they really identified themselves in the emails and they made stupid mistakes and then they caught them. Really, if you do this properly, nobody will ever find you. Good. There is a report or a document, an explanation from the Federal Office of Civil Protection in Switzerland. They did a scenario on denial of service attacks around 2012-13. The report is published, and I just tweeted the link to that one. That is fairly interesting because the Swiss Office for Civil Protection, they really thought it through into detail what happens if Switzerland as a country becomes under attack. That's a really good and interesting document. Melanie, so the Federal Reporting Analysis Center for Information Assurance, they're doing annual reports, or I think 2 reports per year, and they're always covering denial of service attacks. So if you want to learn about the history of denial of service attack, the size of them within Switzerland, these reports are really important, are really good. In 2017, Melanie also issued a warning that several financial institutes were being extorted with denial of service extortion. And unlike ransomware, it should be noted, with ransomware, it makes sense to pay. I mean, your files are lost. You pay a few bitcoins, which can be quite expensive nowadays. You pay a couple of bitcoins, and then you get your files back, and then you finally fix your backup, and the next time you're no longer a victim to extortion via ransomware. With denial of service attack, it's different. When you pay, then you've just proven the point that you're willing to pay to stay online. I mean, that's like an invitation to ask for more money the next time. So there is more to say about denial of service attacks. In Switzerland, the e-voting is an important topic now in Switzerland. I don't know if you follow the news, but the fierce critics of e-voting have made it very clear that they see denial of service attack as an interesting proof of point that e-voting is weak and should be abandoned. There shouldn't be e-voting in Switzerland. And they've called for attack. Does somebody do denial of service attack of e-voting? I've just retweeted a tweet where they prove this. You can search for the hashtags DDoS and e-voting in Switzerland. You find dozens of these tweets. Good. So we haven't seen much DDoS recent 1, 2, 3 years in Switzerland, but it could be back anytime, either for vandalism or for extortion. Trends. Growth is the first trend. It's a no-brainer. You can call it Moore's Law, whatever. DDoS is on the rise. It's getting bigger. Nowadays, we see massive DDoS attacks above 1 terabit per second of data. And that's like really a lot. Unless you're a global player, you're not swallowing a terabit of bandwidth. I suppose. Well, maybe you do in your basement a little, sorry, probably not. Botnets rely on IoT devices nowadays. I mean, the Mirai botnet 2 years ago was running on vulnerable webcams. Sounds very stupid. Good enough. 200,000 webcams attacking you. And they haven't even been very sophisticated. It was just good enough to do several hundred gigabit per second of data. And this has been 2 years ago. There are more IoT devices nowadays. In fact, the growth of the network capacity of the carriers is much slower than the tremendous growth of IoT devices. So they're sold like candy or given away like candy nowadays, and carriers really have to invest into infrastructure. So these two lines are no longer meeting. I think DDoS attack is getting more fierce all the time, and carriers have a hard time catching up with the development. And I think this affects the biggest of carriers now. And if it's not now, it's in a couple of years. IoT is a major driver for large DDoS attacks. And I mean, imagine the situation. It would be extremely embarrassing for a Swiss bank to fall victim to a denial of service attack carried out with the help of wireless enabled toasters, for example. Still, it could happen any time. The question is, why is it actually not happening? I mean, the various options. My personal idea is, nobody's interested in vandalizing Swiss banks, and if you do, then you're probably really having law enforcement behind your back. But then you're only extorting victims that are likely to pay. And I don't think that a Swiss bank is going to pay you to stay online. They will try everything, but they're not going to pay. I mean, a bank paying a robber is out of question. I think that's why we're not seeing toasters attacking Swiss banks. And I think that's the only reason we're not seeing toasters attacking Swiss banks. Good. Second trend, application level. Traditionally, we've seen denial of service attacks on the network. You've probably heard about SYN floods, ICMP floods, famous teardrop attack on Windows servers, reflection attacks carried out via UDP. So, like, I attack him and with his IP address, and then the victim, he attacks him and he goes down in a reflection attack. And this can be combined with amplification, where I do a very small package and then the victim gets thousands of packages in return. So that's extremely dangerous, but it's inherent, built into these protocols. It's not always clear if this is really network-based anymore, or if it's application-based. It's hard to tell sometimes, but practical, it doesn't really matter. It's an attack and somebody's supposed to die in this. The largest amount of attacks are still network-based. Traditionally, they're network-based, and application-level attacks are slowly growing. But it's an extremely slow trend. They've been growing like 10 years, and I think maybe it's a fifth or a quarter of the attacks are nowadays application-level. The rest is still network-based. Why is that? There are two reasons, I think. It's extremely simple to do it on a network base. An idiot can really do this because it's inherent to the protocol. You just fire and you're gone. And it's also very, very simple to do DOS as a service because the customer forms this as an IP address. And if your customers don't know what an IP address is, then you can have them fill in the domain name, a host name, and then press attack. That's all it takes. With an application attack, it's also extremely simple to do this, but let's say it takes 5 minutes of research. Because you need to tailor the attack a wee bit to hit the application service you want to attack. So that would demand a huge change in the customer interfaces of denial of service providers, and that's not happening. Why it's not happening? It's not necessary. Network-based denial of service attack still work. So why would they change the game? That's why application-level attacks are very slowly rising. But let's say we face such an application-level attack, and we need to defend it. I'd like to play this through with you for a couple of minutes because I think it's important to understand what really happens. So I have here a request. This goes to example.com. I don't know if you can read it at the back. That's an envelope, an IP envelope, whatever, going to example.com. I have my Swiss Army knife with me, and I can open the envelope now and look inside. Network attack would be one of the outer envelopes, and the envelopes wrap around the payload. What do we have in here? Oh, we have a TCP session. Yeah, TCP session. Yeah, that makes sense on the internet. Let's open the TCP session. What do we have inside the TCP session? Bloody hell. Oh, we have an IP packet. Yeah, of course. This was, I had this coming. We have an IP package. Okay. We're now in the domain of stateful inspection. That's what a firewall is doing. It has to look inside this somehow. So, oh no, I don't know. This is Matryoshka. This is another. This Russian doll we're running. SSL TLS encryption. Oh no, fuck. Let's decrypt this traffic. We need to look into this. Let's see what we have in here. Oh yeah, we have an HTTP request. It's a post to login do with a host name example.com. Yeah, if you know about HTTP, that's how it looks like. But it's still no payload. So let's see if we're at the final stage. Open this one as well. Hey, we have a payload. Yeah. We have a login. We have a username Christian and a funny password. So if you want to inspect application level denial of service attack, you have to open all these packages. You need to look inside and then decide, I don't know if we have a user called Christian. We need to look it up in the directory. And that's an awful lot of work to do. And if you want to defend an denial of service attack, you want to do this in the edge of your network. So suddenly the edge of the network needs to know all the user in the directory. And that's really annoying. You need to take denial of service into the consideration when you construct your architecture. Because once you've built your network, then it's too late. And this means denial of service is really important for all of you. Even if you're only hitting or being hit with denial of service every couple of years, you need to think about this from the beginning. And of course, it's not a single letter that's coming way. The problem is there are lots of these packages. I mean, there are probably 10,000, hundreds. I've brought a few of them, and it's really an avalanche that's coming after you and attacking you, and you need to open all these packages to defend against. And that's a huge amount of work. And that's really an issue. And if we continue with the third trend, like 6-8 years ago, SSL Labs was created, and this made encryption available for the rest of us. Alles dump medievalists who don't know encryption, we learned how to defend with this. And then Let's Encrypt came and gave us certificates for free. Wonderful. But as you've just seen, if we want to defend against encryption, encrypted application layer defense, then the device doing the protection for us, the device filtering for us, needs to decrypt the service. So the device needs to be in the known. It needs access to the keys. And that is, I think, the game changer here. With clear text traffic, anybody can filter. With encrypted traffic, the device filtering needs to be in the known about the encryption. And that's making this extremely dangerous. This plays together, all these trends play together, and this is the rise of the content delivery networks. Content delivery networks are global. They're decentralized somehow. So you used to run your server in your basement for your friends or in your local company, in your institution, and that was kind of centralized. You had one server to run or a little server farm, and nowadays this is globalized. The content delivery networks, they put your server in a global context, and then Japanese customers, they're no longer coming to your server directly. They're being served in Japan. So this works thanks to Anycast network technology. This is a decentralization of traffic, and it reduces latency. It's really very good, and it increases bandwidth because these networks are specialized to serve on the quick. So they're extremely fast. And you don't have to mess with static content anymore because they are hosting the static content for you globally, and your customers will love it because it's a lot faster. So that's great. Unfortunately, this also comes with a few strings attached. Let's look at this quote from Matthew Prince, the CEO of Cloudflare, one of the CDN services. In a not so distant future, if we're not there already, it may be that if you're going to put content on the internet, you'll need to use a company with a giant network like Cloudflare, that's him, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, Amazon, or Alibaba. Are you scared? Because this scares the shit out of me. It says, you're no longer able to host a web server yourself. You need me to deliver content on the internet. I think that's really scary. Let's continue. This is Damien Mention from Google. He's one of the persons running DDoS defense for Google. And when I talked to him at the Usenix Enigma conference 2 years ago, or almost 2 years ago, he would go, like, within 2-3 years, there will only be 2 to 3 players in the world that are able to withstand the biggest DDoS attacks and protect websites on a global scale. So it's not only 6 or 8 companies able to do this. No, there's actually a consolidation happening. And at the end of this consolidation, he thinks 2 or 3 years down the road. He told me 2 years ago. So go figure. There will be only 2 or 3 players left who are able to guarantee your service to remain online. And now let's connect the dots here. This is what Paul Wixie said in 2017 at a public workshop in Zurich. I think we're going to see a future where people will accept to pay money in extortion. They will accept to pay money when they're extorted via denial of service. It will be part of the cost of doing business. As an alternative, there will be a handful of expensive services that can protect you from DDoS attacks, and these services effectively control what new startups will be allowed to operate onto the internet. This boils down to, if you're a startup and you're targeting Google with your service, Google has the power to shut you down when they push you out in the rain away from the protection umbrella that the modern CDNs are guaranteeing. Meaning these networks have a tremendous amount of power now with the big denial of service attacks. They're here to take you down. And a startup is not able to pay the extortion money, and it is unlikely to be able to pay for the protection services. And I think that's very, very dangerous. CDN hits limits. You need to integrate your service into the CDN. I've given you the example of a login request, and obviously Cloudflare does not have access to your directory. So if Cloudflare needs to understand if a certain user is part of your directory, somehow they cannot do this. That's fairly difficult. They have means to tackle this. They're very good, like dynamically put in a CAPTCHA. Oh, this is a login request. That's fair enough. But first, fill out the CAPTCHA, and the toaster is unlikely to be able to fill out the CAPTCHA. So that's actually fairly effective. It's an effective means. But one of the limits, obviously, is you need to give the encryption key to one of 3, 5, 7 global companies. So if the attack is encrypted, if you want protection from Cloudflare, you need to give your keys to Cloudflare. There are schemes for keyless SSL via Cloudflare. Somehow, no. This limits the exposure of your key, but you're still handing them over the key. You give them control over the traffic. And let's go back to CIA. Confidentiality, integrity, availability. I said at the beginning, denial of service only affects availability. No, that's no longer the case. The moment you want global scale protection, confidentiality goes down the ditch. Because you're handing over the encryption keys to a global service provider. And that service provider is not a Swiss company. The jurisdiction is no longer Swiss. I think that's a huge thing. There is an alternative protection, GeoIP. Like I said, post-finance defended like this. It's an extremely effective means of defense if you have a local customer base. As it happens, Switzerland is a local small country. Most companies have only Swiss customers, or 90% Swiss customers. And during an attack, you say, I'll concentrate on the Swiss IP addresses. There is collateral damage. Our foreign customers, too bad. But this is effective, and in half an hour, we'll be right back to serve the international customers as well. That's how GeoIP works. Devices are very well enabled to do GeoIP nowadays. Firewalls, routers, you just, there's a pull-down menu. And if there is no pull-down menu, it's easy to implement this yourself via an ACL, an access control list. As it happens, in IPv4, there are like a couple of thousand Swiss autonomous systems. Or in the RIPE database, you can consolidate this with the help of Excel if you need to. And then fill this into your router and you're on. So that kind of works. And this gives you total control over the traffic. And it's really effective. And it's a way of retaining availability, for your local customers while maintaining confidentiality and integrity. You could say you give up international availability for the duration of the attacks whilst maintaining confidentiality and integrity. And this is very important for certain businesses. I mean, an online shop probably doesn't care too much, but banks will care about this, and government services, eGov, will rely on keys remaining in Switzerland. I think it's out of question that Swiss government will hand over SSL keys to a US company as to order a passport. I personally think that's unlikely. So I think they will likely have to work with a GeoIP scheme. GeoIP has limits, of course. I would say if we take, this photo, if you take the inauguration of Donald Trump, then there was a large crowd of people gathering in Washington. But I'm sure that Swisscom would have been able to withstand an attack by the Trump crowd. But this is the different image. That's the Obama crowd. So that's the Obama inauguration. As we all know, this has been more people. And I'm pretty sure if all the smartphones on this photo would wage an attack on the Swisscom network, far beyond 1 terabit of data, Switzerland would go down, Swisscom would go down, Swiss carriers are not able to withstand this anymore. GeoIP doesn't work anymore because the tube running into the first defense device, the core router on the access gateway, will go down. The pipe will be clogged. And this doesn't work anymore. So we need something new. And this is where my new proposal comes in. Local route announcements. BGP is the routing protocol of the internet. It's been around for 20, 30 years. It isn't extremely smart, but it has a few options which are interesting. And I'm not a network engineer, but I'm proposing, I haven't tried this out myself. I talked to quite a few network engineers and they say, yeah, that could probably work. But I haven't tried this out myself, and I don't know anybody who has tried this out myself. But in the course of my talk, I think there is a certain unavoidability. This has to come, or somebody will do this or will have to do this. Maybe e-voting providers will have to do this one day, or e-gov sites will have to do this one day. How does it work? What you do is you base on the fact that ISPs in Switzerland, they're peering with one another. Like almost all Swiss ISPs are peering with all the other Swiss ISPs. Let's say that's a community of well-interlinked ISPs in Switzerland. And now the BGP protocol has a flag which says, look, peer, I'm giving you a route to direct traffic to my AS, to my autonomous system, but please don't propagate this route. This is only for you. This is only for your customers. Don't propagate it beyond your network. So this would mean that the autonomous system is routable from within the group of peers. So Swiss ISPs will be able to route the traffic to a Swiss service, and everybody outside, like all the attackers, and unfortunately also a couple of international customers or users, are no longer able to route it. Meaning the attackers with their huge botnets are not able to direct the traffic to actually hit the victim residing within Switzerland. Now this has interesting effects, of course. I still think the attack would be over fairly quickly. It's no longer effective. You might have a couple of Swiss attackers, botnet zombies residing in Switzerland, but that's not so much of a problem because you have a phone number for the ISP. And you ring them up and say, look, you have a few toasters attacking me. Could you stop these toasters, please? I think that would work fairly well, especially if you're government. That should be okay and solvable. But other strings attached have to do, you're dividing up the network somehow, aren't you? The internet is a global network, and here you're introducing gaps, like GeoIP. You're setting up borders on the internet. Somebody would say, I'm only peering or routing friendly IP addresses of ISPs. I know ISPs under my own jurisdiction. I remember Mark Henauer from the Secret Service branch of Melanie saying or stating quite clearly, IP address space is not Swiss territory. But with the digitalization becoming more and more important in Switzerland, and eGov being quite a thing, and one day we'll have an electronic ID card, then this digital world, this virtual world, is becoming more and more important. And I think Swiss government services, they will have to come back to the statement and update it and state, yes, IP address space, Swiss online services are part of our territory. And if they declare this, then they will have to defend it. And this will mean that the Office of Civil Protection will come up with contingency plans to support Swiss companies to stay online during denial of service attacks. And Switzerland and this mechanism I just explained, that it's the same borders. And this could be one of the means that they're proposing. And I don't know if you have noticed, but last spring, the second national cyber strategy for Switzerland was released or confirmed by the federal government. And the first time the army is now part of the game. So the national cyber strategy used to be civil, but now the army is at the table as well. It's not, they don't have the first seat at the table, but they're starting to talk about this in the army too. So I think we need to pay attention to this. This is a big development, and the more important digitalization becomes, the more important defenses like this will become. And I think it is likely that we might see this, maybe it's not even Switzerland, but a different government trying this out one day or the other. And this will mean to cut off the national autonomous systems, the national IP addresses, the national IP address space from the rest of the internet for at least the duration of an attack. And depending on the duration of the attack, there is a widening crack between this island of the internet and the global internet, and this could lead, or one of the trends which might lead to the so-called balkanization of the internet. So the division and cutting apart of the global internet. And this, I think, is one of the reasons why denial of service attack is extremely dangerous and bloody interesting on top of it. Thank you for your attendance.
Merci Christian pour cette présentation très intéressante sur DDoS. On a le temps, je pense, pour une ou deux questions avant d'aller manger. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions?
Yeah.
You talked about the fact that in 2 and 3 years we all need to use Google or Alibaba to connect when you serve a web service. What can we do to not do that?
I think it's extremely hard to come back on that trend. I think the content delivery networks are so strong now, and they really provide a service. I mean, they do have a very strong business case. So I have a hard time seeing through this. Have you heard of the Cyan project? That's a Swiss alternative network architecture. This has been developed within Switzerland. They're going out now. They want to make this into an official RFC. And they say they have, they've developed a protocol where you have more control over the routing. With BGP, you just control your peers. And then what the peers are doing is out of your control. With this Cyan routing protocol, you get control who routes how to your service. And I've talked to this guy, or one of these guys, is that a response to this problem? And he said, yeah, he thinks Cyan could be a solution to this. I'm not understanding nearly enough to really see if that is a solution. Outside of that, I'm really pessimistic. I see the power of the CDNs is huge nowadays. And denial of service attacks, I mean, if the toasters of the world are coming after you, you have a hard time with your local server. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Dernière question?
Here in front.
I just want to share, understand what you say. You said like, Swiss banks are not being attacked today. That's what you're saying? I don't want to misquote you. That's just the only thing.
Yeah. I cannot really tell.
Okay.
What is happening here? I was going in the wrong direction.
Okay.
Just want to sum up. We have done this. You see the sources, context line.
Okay.
Yeah. I think Swiss banks, but Post-Finance was definitely attacked back in the day when they were not really a bank.
Yeah.
Others, banks might have been attacked or they have been attacked. I'm not really up to date with news anymore. Certainly no big bank went down in DDoS and it wasn't in the news.
I don't think they went down necessarily, but I think this might be underreported or not reported at all because it's not as the interest to report that thing anyway in the first place. And especially under a certain amount, they won't even report to the police because, you know, it's just, it's pocket money for some banks, right? For a few thousand, a few 100,000.
Yeah. I mean, you have a point there that they would avoid getting to the media. Yeah. But then who cares? The moment it is effective, it will be in the media. And we haven't seen this. So, maybe they defend. Maybe they even pay.
I think they pay, actually. That's the whole point.
But, I think payment, I mean, if they pay, the sums are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And at a given moment,
I think there's a market because it's like there's a market. Like criminals, they won't go into asking millions because they know at this point, you know, secret services will be involved. So they ask for sums like banks say, yeah, that's it. You know, next time we patch our stuff and that's it.
You have a point, but why go after a bank when you can go about a Swiss online shop?
Oh, they do that too.
Yeah, probably. I think it's more likely.
I know small businesses in Châtel, where I'm from, will getting hacked actually.
Yeah.
It's very common for
it's really coming. And when you depend 100% on online, business, then you're likely to pay because they're going to kill you. Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks.
I think the Melanie reports are really through. And I'm really convinced that Melanie would know if this would happen. And I think they would certainly not name the company, but they would make it transparent that this is happening in Switzerland to alarm everybody that this is happening. And they haven't reported on that. And their relationship, as far as I can see, is fairly close with the core infrastructure providers in Switzerland. So I think this is not happening, but what do I know? I'm a medievalist in the end. Let's take a final one. And,
on va prendre la dernière.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm just trying to making the dots between what you mentioned regarding the CDN, right?
Yes.
Then the recommendation on the BGP local announcement.
Okay, the crazy part. Good.
Yeah. And the way that Switzerland is doing business, basically Switzerland is making business by exporting, right?
Yeah.
So then
that is a problem, isn't it? Yeah, that is a problem there.
On the local
yeah, absolutely.
announcements.
Yeah. I mean, this has to play into the architecture. Does this really need to be centralized? Does this have to be the same website? That's why I said you really need to think about this. I released a tweet during the talk where I have a guide, what you could think about when you set up your architecture. And then the defense, ideally, it's only temporary, like for half an hour. I mean, important business is not lost in half an hour. And then the attack usually goes away when you employ GYP. Other than that, yeah, that's a real problem. I mean, we're an export-oriented nation and cutting off foreign traffic is painful. But then I see this as a standard industry company, they don't have that much of a problem handing out their encryption keys. But for government, it's way out of league. So, and I think there is a distinction. And government, first and foremost, has local citizens that they address. It's true that with e-voting, there is an irony in the fact that e-voting is being proposed for international Swiss voters, and they might be cut off if this scheme is being adopted. Of course, but then voting periods is 1 month, and it would say, yeah, we're down today, we're coming back tomorrow when the attackers have given up.
So for me, then is this solution, the proposed solution is good if you do business only in Switzerland, like governments, military.
Let's sort of say, yeah, then it's a lot easier. Yeah.
Thank you.
Alors, merci encore, Christian. Thank you very much.